After our anniversary dinner, she stood up, zipped her dress, and smirked. Cute meal. Now I'm going to get some fun for myself. I told her calmly, "You're not walking out that door." She froze, glared at me, and whispered, "Touch me, and I'll end you with one call." She slammed the door anyway. By morning, when she discovered what I'd done, I had 149 missed calls. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Comment your country or city below. I love seeing where everyone's watching from. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place Jade used to love. Small, intimate, tucked away on a side street in the old part of downtown where the buildings still had character and the sidewalks were cobblestone instead of concrete. Soft amber lighting from vintage Edison bulbs cast a warm glow over the dark wood tables, and a jazz quartet played quietly in the corner. Nothing intrusive, just background music that filled the spaces between conversations without demanding attention. I'd made the reservation 3 weeks in advance. Bella Notte, the place we'd gone on our first anniversary 6 years ago. Back then, we'd sat at the same table by the window, watching people pass by on the street, making up stories about their lives. Jade had laughed so hard at something I said that she'd snorted wine through her nose, and we'd both dissolved into the kind of uncontrollable laughter that makes other diners stare, but you don't care, because you're too happy to be self-conscious. I'd hoped returning here might spark something, might remind us of who we used to be before the distance crept in, before the silence became more common than conversation, before her phone became more interesting than my presence. I was 41 years old and trying to save a marriage that was quietly dying while pretending everything was fine. Jade sat across from me in a black dress I'd never seen before. Fitted, elegant, expensive-looking. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup flawless. She looked beautiful. She also looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. We'd ordered appetizers, bruschetta for her, calamari for me. The bread arrived crispy and warm, topped with fresh tomatoes and basil, exactly as good as I remembered. I'd offered her a piece. She'd declined without looking up from her phone. "Work stuff?" I'd asked, trying to keep my tone light, conversational, not accusatory. She'd glanced at me briefly, her eyes taking a moment to focus, like she was coming back from somewhere far away. "Oh, yeah, just client emergency." It was 9:30 on a Saturday night. She was in marketing, not emergency medicine. There was no such thing as a client emergency that couldn't wait until Monday. But I didn't push. I'd learned months ago that pushing only led to arguments, and arguments led to her shutting down completely, and I was trying to rebuild, not destroy. Our entrees arrived. I'd ordered the braised short ribs, something hearty and comforting. Jade had gotten the salmon with asparagus, her usual health-conscious choice even though it was our anniversary, and calories shouldn't matter for one night. She picked at it with her fork, moving pieces around her plate more than actually eating, like a child trying to make it look like they'd eaten more than they had. "How is it?" I asked. "Fine," she said. "Not good, not delicious, just fine." The word people use when they don't want to engage. I tried again. "Remember the last time we were here? When you—" "Evan, I remember. You don't need to keep bringing up the past like it's some kind of proof that we used to be happy." The words stung, sharp and unexpected. I set my fork down carefully, suddenly not hungry anymore, despite how good the food was. "I wasn't trying to prove anything," I said quietly. "I was just trying to have a conversation." She sighed, the kind of dramatic exhale that suggested I was being exhausting, that my attempt at connection was somehow burdensome. "Can we just eat?" So we ate, in silence. The jazz quartet transitioned into a rendition of "The Way You Look Tonight," and the irony wasn't lost on me. Jade was looking at her phone again, her fingers moving across the screen with the kind of focus she used to direct at me, at us. I watched her, really watched her, and tried to figure out when exactly I'd become invisible in my own marriage. She'd been distant for months, more than distant, absent. Physically present but emotionally checked out, like she was living in our house, but her real life was happening somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't invited. She came home late from work multiple times a week, always with vague explanations about meetings that ran long or drinks with colleagues whose names changed every time. She'd started going to the gym at odd hours, 10 p.m. on Tuesday, 5 a.m. on Friday, times that seemed calculated to minimize our interaction rather than maximize her fitness. Her phone was always face down now. She'd changed her passcode, something she'd never bothered with before. She'd started wearing perfume I didn't recognize, sexier than her usual scent. She'd updated her entire wardrobe, bought new lingerie I'd only seen in the laundry, never on her. All the cliché signs of infidelity that people joked about in movies and TV shows, so obvious that they couldn't possibly be real. Except they were real, and they were happening in my marriage. I'd told myself I was being paranoid, that suspicion was toxic, that I should trust my wife. But trust is supposed to be mutual, and somewhere along the way, she'd stopped trusting me with the truth of her life. The waiter came by with dessert menus. I took one. Jade waved hers away. Not even tiramisu? I asked. It was her favorite. We used to share a slice here, feeding each other bites across the table like we were still in the early stages of love when everything felt romantic and significant. I'm watching my weight, she said flatly. Jade, you're beautiful. You don't need to. I said I'm watching my weight, she snapped, her voice sharp enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. I ordered the tiramisu anyway, more out of stubbornness than actual desire for dessert. It arrived on a delicate white plate, dusted with cocoa powder, looking like something from a food magazine. I took a bite. It tasted like ashes in my mouth, like trying to enjoy something when the person you want to share it with couldn't care less whether you're happy or miserable. Jade checked her phone again, then again. Her leg was bouncing under the table, a nervous energy I recognized from when she was agitated or excited about something. She kept glancing at the door like she was waiting for someone or counting down the minutes until she could leave, and then she stood up. Just like that, mid-dessert, mid-anniversary dinner. She stood up, pushed her chair back with a scrape that cut through the ambient music, and grabbed her clutch from the table. She adjusted her dress, reaching behind herself to zip it up higher. A gesture so casual and yet so deliberate, like she was putting on armor or preparing for something that didn't involve me. People were watching now. The couple beside us. The waiter pausing mid-stride with his tray. Even the jazz quartet seemed to falter for a moment. Jade looked down at me with an expression I'd never seen before on her face. Not anger, not sadness, but something colder. Contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt. Like I was something beneath her, something she'd outgrown and was finally ready to discard. She smiled. Not a real smile. A smirk. Triumphant and cruel. Cute meal, she said, her voice loud enough that I knew she meant for others to hear. Loud enough to humiliate me in public, to mark this moment as something memorable and devastating. Now I'm going to get some fun for myself. The words hung in the air like a slap. I felt them physically. Felt every head in the restaurant turn toward us. Felt the weight of strangers' pity and judgment and curiosity. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I kept my face neutral, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. She grabbed her bag, adjusted it on her shoulder, and turned toward the door. And something in me snapped into place. Not rage, that would come later. What I felt was clarity. Cold, absolute clarity. The kind you get when you finally stop lying to yourself and see the situation for exactly what it is. You're not walking out that door, I said. My voice was calm, steady, low enough that only she could hear, but firm enough that she couldn't mistake it for anything but a line being drawn. She didn't make a mistake. She made a statement. Jade froze mid-step, her back still to me. For a moment, I thought she might actually listen, might turn around and sit back down, and we could have the real conversation we should have been having for months. The kind where we talked about what was actually happening instead of pretending everything was fine while our marriage rotted from the inside out. But then she turned slowly, deliberately, like a character in a horror movie revealing that the monster was there all along. Her face had transformed from contempt to something darker, calculated malice. Her eyes were cold, her jaw set, her entire posture radiating controlled fury. "What did you just say to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow more threatening than if she'd shouted. I stayed seated, my hands flat on the table, my posture open and non-threatening. I wasn't grabbing her. I wasn't blocking her path. I hadn't even stood up, but I also wasn't backing down. "I said you're not walking out that door," I repeated, keeping my tone even. "Not like this. Not on our anniversary. Not to go have fun with someone else while I sit here like an idiot who doesn't know his own wife is cheating on him." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that I'd finally said it out loud, that I'd finally acknowledged what we'd both been pretending wasn't happening. But the surprise was quickly replaced by something harder, meaner. She took 2 steps back toward the table, leaning down so her face was level with mine, so close I could smell her perfume. That new scent I didn't recognize, probably bought for someone else's benefit. "Touch me," she hissed, each word deliberate and precise, "and I'll end you with one call." The threat was so specific, so calculated, that it took me a moment to process what she was actually saying. She wasn't just warning me not to physically stop her, she was threatening to destroy me. To call the police, probably, to claim I'd assaulted her, to weaponize the entire system against me with one conversation, one lie, one performance of victimhood that would erase everything I'd built and turn me into the villain of a story I didn't even recognize. That sentence hit me harder than her betrayal, because the cheating, as devastating as it was, could be explained away as a failing of the heart, a lapse in judgment, a weakness. But this was premeditated cruelty. This was her acknowledging that not only did she want to leave, not only did she want to hurt me, but she was prepared and willing to destroy me completely if I dared to stand in her way. This was the real Jade. Not the woman I'd married, not the woman I'd thought I'd spend my life with. This was someone I didn't know at all. I didn't move, didn't respond, just looked at her, really looked at her, and let the full weight of what she'd said settle over me like a blanket of ice. She straightened up, satisfied that her threat had landed, that she'd successfully terrified me into submission. She adjusted her bag again, ran a hand through her hair, and turned back toward the door. And then she left. Just walked out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, past the staring diners and the frozen waiter and the jazz quartet that had stopped playing entirely. The door opened, letting in a gust of cool night air and the sound of traffic, and then it slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the suddenly silent restaurant. Gone. I sat there for a moment, surrounded by strangers who were trying very hard to pretend they hadn't just witnessed my public humiliation. The waiter approached cautiously, like I might explode or break down or cause a scene. "Sir, is everything... Would you like the check?" "Yes, please," I said quietly. My voice sounded normal, calm, like my world hadn't just shattered into 1,000 pieces. He brought the bill, I paid it, left a generous tip because none of this was his fault, and he'd have a story to tell the other servers after his shift. I stood up, collected my jacket from the back of the chair, and walked out of Bellinot for what I knew would be the last time. The night air was cool against my face. I could see Jade's taillights disappearing down the street, heading in the direction opposite from our house, heading toward wherever her fun was waiting. I started walking. Our house was only about a mile away, and I needed the time to think, to process, to plan. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from her. Don't wait up. The audacity of it. The absolute fucking audacity. I didn't respond, didn't call, didn't chase after her or beg her to come home or try to salvage something that was clearly unsalvageable. Instead, I walked through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, past houses with lights on and families inside who maybe had their own problems but at least weren't actively destroying each other. And with each step, the shock wore off and something else took its place. Not anger, not yet. What I felt was purpose. Cold, crystalline purpose. She thought I'd chase her. She thought I'd wait up, pacing the floor, calling and texting and making myself sick with worry and jealousy while she did whatever she was doing with whoever she was doing it with. She thought that when she finally came home in the morning, reeking of someone else and guilt, I'd either explode or collapse, giving her ammunition for the narrative she'd already constructed. That I was controlling, volatile, unhinged, that she'd had to leave because I made her feel trapped. She'd miscalculated. I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to give her the drama she was clearly craving, the excuse she needed to justify her betrayal. Instead, I was going to take my life back. She thought I'd chase her. Instead, I took my life back. I arrived home around 11 p.m. The house was dark, empty, echoing with a silence that felt different now. Not peaceful, but hollow, like a shell of something that used to have meaning. I stood in the entryway for a moment, keys still in my hand, looking at the space we'd shared for 5 years. The furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the walls from trips we'd taken when we still liked each other, the wedding picture on the mantel, both of us smiling like we'd discovered the secret to happiness, and it was simply choosing the right person and promising to stay. How naive we'd been. Or maybe just I'd been naive. Maybe Jade had always known this wouldn't last, had always been keeping her options open, had always viewed our marriage as something temporary and conditional rather than permanent and sacred. I walked upstairs to our bedroom. The bed was made, Jade's decorative pillows arranged precisely the way she liked them. Everything in its place. Everything looking normal and domestic and fine, like a stage set of a happy marriage with all the actual happiness removed. I grabbed my laptop from the desk and sat down. For the next 2 hours, I worked methodically, clinically, like I was executing a business plan rather than dismantling my marriage. First, the finances. We had 3 bank accounts, 1 joint account for household expenses, and 2 individual accounts we'd kept from before we were married. I'd always contributed more to the joint account since I earned slightly more, had always been the responsible one, making sure bills were paid on time, making sure we had savings for emergencies. I logged into the joint account. $14,000. I transferred half, $7,000, to my personal account. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Just what was fairly mine. Then I removed my name from the account entirely, submitted the paperwork electronically, effective immediately. Next, my personal account. I transferred everything to a new account at a different bank entirely. One Jade had no connection to, no way of accessing. $32,000 in savings moved with 3 clicks. I updated my direct deposit information with my employer, changed all my security questions, enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. I was sealing off access points, closing doors, making sure that when she realized what I was doing, she wouldn't be able to retaliate financially. Then I moved on to the house. We owned it jointly, but the security system was in my name. I logged into the app and disabled Jade's access, changed the entry codes, updated the permission settings so she couldn't monitor who came and went or access the cameras. The house was as much hers as mine legally, but I wasn't going to let her use the security system to track my movements or gather ammunition for whatever story she'd eventually tell. I changed passwords, email, social media, cloud storage, everything. Jade had known most of my passwords. We'd shared them early in our marriage in a gesture of trust and transparency. That trust was now a vulnerability I needed to eliminate. And then I opened the folder I'd been building for the last 6 weeks. I wasn't proud of it. Surveillance felt dirty, invasive, like I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. But I also hadn't been stupid. I'd noticed the signs, the changes, the distance. And while I'd hoped I was wrong, while I'd wanted to trust my wife, I'd also quietly documented everything just in case. Screenshots of text messages I'd seen over her shoulder before she started keeping her phone face down. Receipts I'd found in her car from restaurants we'd never been to, from hotels in our own city that made no sense unless she was meeting someone. Credit card statements showing charges at lingerie stores on days she'd told me she was working late. Her location history from the tracking app we'd both agreed to use for safety, a feature she'd probably forgotten was active, showing her at addresses that weren't her office or the gym or anywhere she was supposed to be. I hadn't confronted her with any of it, hadn't printed it out and thrown it in her face in a dramatic confrontation. I just quietly saved it, backed it up in 3 separate places, and waited. Now I compiled it into a single PDF, organized, dated, annotated, a timeline of betrayal told through data and images and receipts. I titled it For the Lawyers, and saved it to a USB drive. Then I printed a separate document, a 2-page letter I'd written at 2 a.m. one night 3 weeks ago when Jade had come home at midnight claiming her phone had died and she'd lost track of time at a work dinner. The letter outlined my intention to file for divorce, cited irreconcilable differences and infidelity, and stated clearly that I would not be contesting the division of assets as long as it was fair and equitable. It was calm, factual, devoid of emotion or accusation. Just the facts of what was happening and what I intended to do about it. I printed it on our home printer, the sound of the machine whirring and clicking obscenely loud in the quiet house. I folded the pages carefully, placed them in an envelope, and wrote on the front in my neatest handwriting, Jade. By 3 a.m., I was exhausted but wired, running on adrenaline and purpose. I packed a suitcase, enough clothes for 2 weeks, my toiletries, my important documents, my laptop, a few personal items that mattered to me. I didn't take anything that was ours. No shared photos, no gifts she'd given me, nothing that would give her grounds to claim I'd stolen from her. I carried the suitcase downstairs and set it by the front door. Then I went to the kitchen and made one final gesture. On the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had breakfast together 1,000 times, where we'd paid bills and planned vacations and had Sunday morning coffee. I placed 2 items, the envelope with the letter and a second envelope labeled clearly, For the Lawyers. I stood there for a moment, looking at them. This was it. The point of no return. Once I walked out that door, once she read those papers, there was no going back, no reconciliation, no pretending this had all been a misunderstanding. The kitchen clock read 4:17 a.m. Jade still wasn't home. She'd been out for over 6 hours, doing God knows what with God knows who, secure in the assumption that I'd be here waiting when she decided to grace me with her presence. I picked up my suitcase, took one last look at the house that used to be a home, and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. I didn't look back. I checked into a hotel about 15 minutes from the house. Nothing fancy. A mid-range chain that was clean and functional. The kind of place business travelers stayed when their company was paying and they just needed somewhere to sleep between meetings. The night clerk barely looked at me as she processed my credit card and handed me a key card for room 237. The room was exactly what I expected. Beige walls, generic art, a bed with too many pillows, a TV mounted on the wall. Impersonal and temporary. Perfect. I set my suitcase down, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let myself feel something beyond the cold purposefulness that had carried me through the night. And what I felt was exhausted, hollowed out. But also, underneath the exhaustion and the hurt and the betrayal, there was something else. Relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and had finally exhaled. Like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged until I set it down. I lay back on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the popcorn ceiling, and waited for dawn. My phone was on silent, face down on the nightstand. I didn't check it, didn't want to know if Jade had come home yet, didn't want to see her name pop up on the screen. I needed a few more hours of peace before whatever came next. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through the gap in the curtains and the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand like an angry bee trapped under glass. I picked it up, squinting at the brightness of the screen. 8:47 a.m., and a wall of notifications that made my stomach tighten. 23 missed calls from Jade, 47 text messages, 5 voicemails, and it was still buzzing. Another call coming in. Jade's name on the screen, her photo, one I'd taken 2 years ago on a beach in Mexico when she was laughing and sun-drunk and beautiful, when I'd thought we'd be happy forever. I let it ring through to voicemail. It started ringing again immediately. I opened the text messages, scrolling through them in chronological order, watching her emotional state deteriorate in real time through the progression of increasingly frantic messages. 6:32 a.m. Where are you? 6:45 a.m. Evan, seriously, where did you go? 6:58 a.m. Your stuff is gone. What the fuck is happening? 7:03 a.m. Did you read this? Did you go through my things? How dare you violate my privacy like this? 7:15 a.m. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this like adults. 7:22 a.m. You're being ridiculous. It was one mistake. 7:35 a.m. Fine. You want to throw away 7 years over one night? 7:48 a.m. Evan, please pick up the phone. 8:01 a.m. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please come home. 8:19 a.m. You're scaring me. Where are you? Are you safe? 8:33 a.m. I'm calling the police if you don't respond. I'm worried something happened to you. 8:41 a.m. Please, just tell me where you are. We can fix this. The messages oscillated between anger and panic, blame and pleading, threats and apologies. The emotional whiplash of someone who'd been completely blindsided, who'd expected to come home to the same dynamic as always. Me waiting, accepting, forgiving, making it easy for her to have everything she wanted with none of the consequences. My phone rang again. This time I answered. What? I said flatly. Not a question. A statement. Oh my God. Evan, where are you? Jade's voice was high-pitched, ragged, like she'd been crying. I came home and your stuff is gone, and there's this paperwork on the table, and I don't understand what's happening. You don't understand? I interrupted, my voice still calm, still level. You walk out of our anniversary dinner to go fuck someone else, threaten to destroy me if I try to stop you, and you don't understand why I'd leave? Silence on the other end. Then, Evan, I didn't. Don't, I said sharply. Don't insult me by lying. Not now. Not after everything. It was a mistake, her voice cracked. It was one time, one stupid mistake, and I was angry and I wanted to hurt you because you've been so distant and... I've been distant? The anger I'd been holding back started seeping through. I planned our anniversary dinner. I made a reservation at the place you used to love. I tried to have a conversation, and you couldn't get off your phone long enough to pretend you gave a shit. I know, I'm sorry. And then you stood up in the middle of a restaurant and announced to everyone around us that you were leaving to have fun with someone else. And when I asked you not to go, you threatened me. You told me you'd end me with one phone call. Do you remember that part, Jade? More silence. Then quietly. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. You meant every word. You'd already thought it through, already planned how you'd use that threat if you needed to. That's not something you say in the heat of the moment. That's something you've been holding in reserve, knowing exactly how much power it gives you. Evan, please. I'm done, Jade. I left the paperwork on the table. Get a lawyer. Don't contact me except through attorneys. No, wait, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, There's nothing to fix. You made your choice last night. I'm just respecting it. I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately started ringing again. I silenced it and set it face down on the nightstand. Over the next 3 hours, the calls kept coming. Over and over, relentless, desperate. I watched the number tick up. 47, 63, 89, 112. The text got increasingly unhinged. You can't do this to me. To us. I'll change. I'll be better. Just come home. This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. My mother is right about you. You've always been controlling. Fine. Keep the house. Keep everything. I don't care. Just talk to me. I love you. Doesn't that matter at all? By noon, I had 149 missed calls. I blocked her number. Then I called my lawyer, a guy named Richard I'd consulted with 2 weeks ago, just to understand my options, to know what I'd be dealing with if it came to this. He'd given me straightforward advice. Document everything, secure your finances, don't make threats, don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or aggression. I'd followed his advice to the letter. Richard, it's Evan Cooper. We spoke a couple weeks ago about a potential divorce case. Evan, yes, I remember. What can I do for you? It's time to file. Can you meet today? Absolutely. Come by at 3. I spent the hours between the call and the meeting doing mundane things. I showered. I ate breakfast at a diner down the street where a tired waitress called me Hon and didn't ask questions. I bought a coffee that was terrible but caffeinated. I sat in my hotel room and stared at the wall and tried to process the fact that my marriage was over. It didn't feel real yet. It felt like something happening to someone else, like I was watching my life from a distance rather than living it. My phone buzzed with a new call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Evan? It was Jade's mother, Patricia. Her voice was cold, accusatory. What have you done to my daughter? Patricia, this is between Jade and me. I'd prefer not to. She's hysterical. She's been calling you all morning, and you won't answer. She says you've left her, taken all your money, filed for divorce without even discussing it. What kind of man does that? The kind who got tired of being cheated on and threatened, I said evenly. Jade says that's a misunderstanding, that you took things out of context. Patricia, with all due respect, I'm not having this conversation. Whatever Jade told you is between you and her. My attorney will be in contact with hers. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked that number too. When you show someone you're willing to destroy them, don't be surprised when they walk away first. 3 days later, I sat in Richard's office waiting for Jade to arrive with her attorney for our first official meeting. Richard's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Everything was chrome and leather and expensive, the visual language of success and power, designed to intimidate or reassure depending on which side of the table you were on. I'd spent the last 72 hours in a strange limbo, working from the hotel room, eating takeout, avoiding everyone I knew because I didn't have the energy to explain what was happening. My brother had called, concerned, because he'd run into Jade's sister somewhere and heard there was trouble. I'd given him the abbreviated version. We were getting divorced, I'd moved out, I didn't want to talk about it yet. Jesus, Evan, are you okay? I will be, I'd said, and I'd meant it. Now, sitting in this conference room with its massive polished table and its view of a city full of people going about their lives, I felt surprisingly calm, detached almost, like I was attending a business meeting rather than the formal dissolution of 7 years of my life. Richard sat beside me, his yellow legal pad filled with notes, his expression professionally neutral. He'd reviewed all the documentation I'd provided, had complimented me on how thorough I'd been, had assured me this should be relatively straightforward since we had no children and I was willing to split assets fairly. She's going to try to appeal to your emotions, he'd warned me. That's normal. People get scared when they realize the consequences are real. Just stay focused. Remember why you're here. I nodded. I knew why I was here. The door opened. Jade walked in, followed by a woman in a sharp navy suit. Her attorney, presumably. Rebecca Chen, according to the email Richard had forwarded me. Known for being aggressive, for getting her clients good outcomes, for not backing down. But it wasn't Rebecca I was focused on. It was Jade. She looked nothing like the icy woman from the restaurant. Nothing like the defiant, cruel version of herself who'd smirked and walked out and threatened me. She looked small, diminished, broken. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, or maybe she'd cried it all off. Her eyes were red and swollen, underscored by dark circles that suggested she hadn't slept. She was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, clothes meant for comfort rather than impression. Her hands were shaking visibly as she clutched her purse. She looked at me, and her face crumpled immediately. Fresh tears started streaming down her cheeks. Evan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond, just watched her with the same calm detachment I'd maintained since that night at the restaurant. Rebecca guided Jade to her seat, a hand on her elbow, whispering something I couldn't hear. They sat across from us. Rebecca pulled out her own legal pad, clicked her pen, and looked at Richard with the professional courtesy of opposing counsel meeting for the first time. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Rebecca began. "I think we can—" "I didn't mean any of it," Jade interrupted, her voice louder now, desperate. She wasn't looking at the lawyers. She was staring directly at me. "Evan, please. I didn't mean any of what I said. I was angry and hurt, and I wanted to hurt you back, but I didn't mean it." "Jade," Rebecca said quietly, a gentle warning. But Jade ignored her. "We can fix this, can't we? We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. I'll quit my job if you think someone there is a problem. I'll give you access to my phone, my accounts, everything. I'll prove to you that I can change. Please, Evan, please." Her voice broke on the last word. She was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking, her hands covering her face. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction at seeing her broken. Not pity for her pain. Not love or anger or anything at all. Just emptiness where she used to live in my heart. "Mrs. Cooper," Richard said gently, "perhaps we should focus on—" "No," I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. "Let her finish." Jade looked up, hope flickering across her devastated face. "Evan, please. I love you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm begging you. Don't throw away 7 years. Don't throw away everything we built. It was one mistake. One terrible, horrible mistake, but it doesn't have to define us." "It wasn't one mistake," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It was dozens of decisions, made over months, all pointing in the same direction. Away from me, away from us. And then, when I asked you not to walk out that door, you threatened me. You told me you'd end me with one phone call. Do you remember that, Jade?" She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I was angry. I didn't mean—" "You meant it," I continued, my tone never rising, never wavering. "You'd already thought about it, already planned how you could weaponize the system against me if I dared to stand in your way. That's not something you say in anger. That's something you've been holding in reserve, knowing exactly how much power it gives you." "I wouldn't have, actually." "But I didn't know that, did I? In that moment, all I knew was that my wife was threatening to destroy my life if I tried to stop her from betraying me. And that told me everything I needed to know about who you are and what this marriage had become." Silence filled the conference room. Even Rebecca had stopped taking notes, just watching the exchange with professional distance. Jade's hands were flat on the table now, her fingers splayed out like she was trying to hold on to something solid. "So that's it?" she whispered. "You've just decided? Without even trying?" "You decided," I said. "That night at the restaurant. You made your choice. I'm just respecting it. By leaving me, by ending everything, by ending what was already over." Rebecca cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps we should discuss the practical matters. Division of assets, the house, the—" "She can have the house," I said, still looking at Jade. "I don't want it. Too many memories I'd rather not live with. We split the equity when it sells. Everything else is divided 50-50, except what was individually ours before the marriage. I'm not asking for alimony. I'm not trying to punish you financially. I just want this done." Jade's jaw was trembling. "Just like that? 7 years, and you can just walk away?" "You already walked away, Jade. You slammed the door on us. I'm just closing it for good." Something shifted in her expression then. The desperate hope drained away, replaced by a kind of hollowness that mirrored what I felt. She understood, finally, that this wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a fight she could win with tears or apologies or promises to change. This was done. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so, so sorry." "I know you are," I said, and I meant it. I believed she was sorry. Sorry she'd been caught. Sorry she was facing consequences. Sorry her plan had backfired so spectacularly. Maybe even genuinely sorry she'd hurt me. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't rebuild trust. Sorry didn't undo the betrayal, or erase the threat, or restore what had been shattered. Sorry was just a word people said when they realized they'd lost something they'd taken for granted. Rebecca and Richard spent the next hour working through the details. I signed where they told me to sign, agreed to everything that was fair, didn't fight or argue or try to take more than my share. Jade sat silently across from me, occasionally wiping her eyes, looking like she was attending a funeral for something she'd killed herself. When we were finished, Rebecca packed up her papers. "We'll be in touch with the final documents within the week." Richard nodded. "Thank you. Evan, shall we?" I stood up, buttoning my jacket, picking up the folder with my copies of everything we'd signed. "Evan," Jade said one last time. Her voice was small, broken, nothing like the confident, cruel woman who'd smirked at me and walked out. "I really am sorry. for what it's worth. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved. This woman I'd built a life with. This woman who'd become a stranger wearing a familiar face. It's worth something, I said finally. Just not enough. Then I walked out of the conference room, Richard behind me. We rode the elevator down in silence, exited into the lobby, stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. The city was alive around us. People walking with purpose, cars honking, someone selling flowers on the corner, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Life continuing on, indifferent to the small personal devastations happening in conference rooms and bedrooms and restaurants all over the world. I took a deep breath, a real one, the kind that fills your lungs completely and reminds you that you're still here, still alive, still capable of starting over. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "How'd it go?" I typed back. "It's done. You okay?" I thought about that for a moment. Was I okay? I'd just legally ended my marriage. I'd watched my wife break down, and I hadn't wavered. I was 41 years old, starting over from scratch, having to rebuild a life I'd thought was already built. But I wasn't sleeping in a house that felt like a mausoleum of false promises. I wasn't waiting up wondering where my wife was, or who she was with. I wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal and lies and threats anymore. "Yeah," I typed back. "I think I will be," and I meant it. I walked to my car, the same car I'd had before the marriage, the one Jade had always wanted me to upgrade to something more impressive. I got in, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Some people slam doors, thinking it makes them powerful, thinking the noise and drama prove they're the one in control, that they're the one who gets to dictate terms. They think the act of leaving, of walking away from something they've broken, somehow makes them strong. But strength isn't in the slamming, it's in the closing. The quiet, deliberate act of recognizing what's broken and having the courage to walk away from it, even when it hurts, even when it's terrifying, even when you're not sure what comes next. Jade had slammed the door to hurt me, to make a statement, to prove she could. She thought the power was in the violence of it, in the sound of wood hitting frame, in my shock and pain and humiliation. But I'd closed it for good, quietly, methodically, permanently. And in doing so, I'd taken back the one thing she'd been trying to control. My life. I pulled out of the parking garage and headed toward whatever came next. The future was uncertain, yes, maybe scary, definitely lonely, at least for a while. But it was mine. Fully, completely, undeniably mine. And for the first time and longer than I could remember, that felt like enough.